Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Ruby.
Happy Black History Month. We're so excited to have our first virtual event of the semester. We are waiting a few seconds for everybody to join the room. I'm Dr. Melissa Hafaf. I'm the director of the Gender Justice Initiative at Georgetown University. We are a cross-campus effort that works between the law, the medical, and the main campus. And we nurture and support programs and research related to intersectional gender justice. Today, we are delighted to partner with the DC Public Library, the campus ministry at Georgetown, the Protestant ministry, as well as the Women's Center to bring this conversation to you. Before we start, I'm just going to give you a few house rules for the webinar. So basically try to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any question at any point. So that way they're all in the same place. And feel free to use the chat for comments, any sort of reactions, sending love, whatever you like, you can use that. And then today also we have two interpreters, two ASL interpreters who will be switching every 20 minutes or so, Tony and Aviva. Thank you very much for being with us today. And we should also be having the closed captioning by Zoom that will start promptly. And the conversation will be in two parts. Basically, we'll have 30 to 40 minutes between the author of the book, Jacqui Lewis, and our two moderators. And then we'll have another 30 minutes for you to ask any questions to the author and the moderators. And so today we are here for this incredible book. I don't know if you got a copy yet, but if you haven't, I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you can get your copy from your local bookstore or from online. And Fierce Love was published last year, and the full title is Fierce Love, A Bold Path to Ferocious Courage, Rule-Breaking Kindness That Can Heal the World. And it addresses our current social political context and this very challenging climate that we're in. And provides an incredible roadmap to healing and transforming ourselves and our society for a better world, hopefully. So I think it will be an incredibly inspiring conversation that we will have today. And now let me introduce our brilliant speakers for today. Dr. and Reverend Jacqui Lewis has over 30 years of ministry experience and is the first African-American and first woman to serve as a senior minister of the Collegiate Church in New York City, founded in 1628. She received her master's in divinity at Princeton Theological Seminary and her PhD in psychology and religion at Drew University. Reverend and Dr. Lewis uses her gifts as an activist, author, preacher, theologian to advocate for racial, gender, and economic equality. Reverend Lewis will be in conversation with Reverend William Lamar, the pastor of the Metropolitan African American Methodist Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., as well as Ruby Sales, a leading social justice activist, scholar, and theologian. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being with us today. We are so delighted and honored. Thank you. I will pass now the mic on to the three of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Chappell.
Dr. I'm going to defer to the great Ruby Sales to get our conversation going.
Wait, you're on mute, love.
Yes, you're still muted. As she's working on that.
Do you hear me?
Got you now.
Hi, Ruby.
Okay, great. Wow. The technology doesn't work.
I'm ready for some in-person hugs with you, Mama Ruby. I'll tell you
Yes.
what. Yeah.
Wow. I feel, first of all, let me thank everyone for gathering and to really think about what does it mean to love each other fiercely in a very fractured and dehumanizing world. I feel like a proud mama who sees her daughter soaring in the world.
Oh,
And I feel so deeply connected to the fierce love that Jacqui gives to us at Miller Church. I mean, I see Miller as my church when I'm in New York. And so I just like to say, Jacqui, I read the book and I'm just moved by two things that strike me that I'd like for you to respond to start our conversation. First of all, you embrace such a radical concept of love in a way that requires us to shift our whole perceptions of ourselves and how we see ourselves and how we see others. And it's very clear that does not happen overnight. So I've been fascinated with asking the question, how is it that you shifted from the superficial kind of love that we are taught to embrace to the kind of radical love that means that we're able to see each other beyond our isms, that when we look at each other, we don't see isms, we see human beings. And how is it that came to be as a Black woman who has faced many systemic assaults? Tell us about your journey towards radical love, and how were you able to do that in the face of the realities of what it meant to be a Black woman, a Black girl in white America? How were you able to see European Americans beyond the isms of racism, of white supremacy?
thank you for that question, Ruby. Your question actually makes my eyes teary, because I think all of us, right, Reverend, want to be seen and heard and loved. And your question makes me feel seen by you. I'll tell a couple quick stories to answer your question. One is as recent as last weekend. Last weekend, I was in Chicago doing a speaking gig, and I didn't get to go home to see Dad for Christmas. And Ruby, my daddy kept up the Christmas tree so that I could come home and do Christmas in February with the kids and him. So all of us descended upon my dad, and we descended upon my dad, who's 87 years old. And you read the book, so you know I tell some bumpy stories on Daddy in this book. And he read the book cover to cover, and he is so proud to be in this book as sometimes my nemesis, okay? And sometimes my advocate, and sometimes my love warrior, and sometimes my foil, because he says he's clear that I got to be me because of him. So he's taking all kind of credit, but it's true that my Black parents taught us some really important lessons about the themes in this book. One being Ubuntu. I am who I am because you are who you are. They taught us this as Black people raised in Jim Crow, Mississippi, who knew that they only made a way out of no way with their single moms because of her uncles, like lots of old uncles around, making a village that raises them. That reminds me of your story, Ruby, of just having a Black community telling you, you are, and you are, and you can, and you can. They got that in church. They got that in Sunday school. They got that growing up, that they could do anything they wanted to be, and they could be anywhere they wanted to be. And they gave that kind of a legacy to their kids, that we are who we are because of each other, our whole community, our aunties, our village. And that was a real wonderful womb in which to become a human. But I also got it in my first experience with whiteness, where I was called the N-word when I was in kindergarten. And my dad went to the base commander, Reverend Lamar, I think Ruby knows the story, but my dad went to the base commander and demanded an apology, demanded reparations, demanded that that little girl apologize and that her father apologize. So he taught me that kind of love is revolutionary and insists on love. And mommy took me to my knees to pray. And we prayed for that girl. And we prayed that no matter what color anybody was, they would feel loved. So this idea of kind of love insisting on justice, love demanding justice as a fierce insistence on its own way. Love does insist on love, right? Sorry, Paul. But also this kind of how do you be with the other? And there was this sense of compassion and prayerful engagement and honest conversation that they had as Black people in the Air Force, hosting Blacks, Japanese, Latinx and white folks at their house for all the bid whist parties, Ruby, for all the dance parties. Their house was the container for the place where love was more important than difference. Does that make sense? And so I take this into my own self growing up in the world. I think that there's just really quick third thing I say right there is, if I ever wondered if love could heal, my dad proves it. He's a Black man injured in Mississippi, a Black man wounded by white racism in the Air Force Base, and now a Black man with a Filipino daughter-in-law, and 2 white son-in-laws, and like we are the United Nations family that comes from our Air Force background. But my dad will let you tell him the truth. My dad will let you fight with him. My dad will let you have those transformative conversations that go beyond platitudes. And my dad's love for us is fierce. And when I'm loving the world fiercely, I feel like I'm thanking my dad for his mistakes and his repentance and his apologies and his repair and his ongoing support that never wavers, no matter what.
So Dr. Lewis, I want to, go ahead, Mrs. Sales.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want to thank you for what you have given to us. And I want to read a couple of lines. Coincidentally, fire is a recurring character in the forging of my identity and outlook. When I was in my 20s, a moving truck fire took almost all of my earthly belongings. And in 2020, just as I was finishing this manuscript, a suspicious fire that started next door to my church in Manhattan consumed all but the facade of my beloved workplace. I realized that both fires gave back as much as they took. I love the fact that you use this imagery of the reality of fire in your life and what it means to bookend your life experiences. And we know in our tradition, fire is a symbol of the divine. Yes. I wonder if you could reflect on where you see the fires of God burning across this nation in ways that are generative, but also in ways that must destroy that which inhibits fierce love.
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah. I think about the scripture that says, who shall abide the day of God's coming? For he will be like a refining fire, right? I think he shall purify, like this sense that God's fiery, beautiful spirit both don't take no stuff and will clarify and purify and sort out that which is against God's plan for the world. When I was a young person, Reverend, and that first fire happened, I had bad theology. I didn't have good Black folks' religion in those days. And I honestly wondered if God was punishing me in some kind of way with that moving van fire. And today, looking at the other fire and the fires that burn around America, I think God was clearing my way. It was like cutting a clearing in the woods with the fire, just taking out what wasn't necessary so that I could focus on God and focus on my calling to ministry that I was hiding from at the time. And the freedom I felt when all the stuff was gone. I mean, I'm not advocating for burning things down, but I'm telling you, I felt liberated, right? That I didn't need the stuff that burned, that I didn't need to replace all the stuff that burned, that my hands were lighter, that my baggage was lighter, that everything was nimble. And it was right after that that I was able to get myself into seminary and do this thing that I was supposed to do that I might not have done. And even as the church has burned down, to be really particular, we have found alliances and partnerships and friends and accomplices around the globe because of the fire. 600 people joined the church since March of 2020, partly due to the fire. We learned how to do ministry in new ways because of the fire. So I'm working in my mind with what is God burning down now, or what do we need to burn down now? What are the systems and structures that are in the way of human flourishing? All of the, I like the way Ruby calls them, the isms that stop us from having real relationship with each other. What about if we burn that down? All of the categories and biases and prejudices that act as prophylactics to our intimacy and stop us from finding out what we have in common. Like, what if we burn that down? What if we burn down what it means to succeed and get new methodologies around that? What if we burn down what we think it means to be a woman child or a male child? What if our boys learn to cry? And what if our women own all of our full power? And what if we own, maybe for the first time, that we're not human unless we're in relationship with other humans, that all of us are interconnected, and that what affects me affects you, and what affects me affects the white Republican in Appalachia who doesn't understand that our destinies are intertwined, but that we do. This is what I hope the fires of today, 10 years since Trayvon's murder, right? All of the hunting and wholesale oppressions of Black folks, that we even imagine that language. This is what my mama teaches me. How do we even reimagine our language so that we own people's giftedness as part of their destiny and not label them as marginalized?
Thank you so much.
Jacqui, as you're talking about fires, I'd like to ask a very simple question. Are all fires holy? Are all fires ordained by God? Or do some fires come because of the accumulation of human hubris? How do we make the distinction?
Yes. Thank you for that, Ruby. Are all fires holy? I want to be really profane.
Are all fires regenerative?
Yeah. Are all fires holy? Hell no. Are all fires redemptive? Absolutely not. Is God?
How do you know the difference?
I don't know that we always do in the moment. How about that? I don't know if we always do in the moment, but I think it's, I'm going to quote you, hindsight, insight, and foresight that help us exegete those fires, help us make meaning of those fires. For our young people, for the people that we're in relationship with, that's our job as public theologians, is to interpret and read meaning into the fires and to give people the tools to distinguish. Burning books, those fires are not of God. Those fires are not redemptive. And we need to be able to speak truth to that, you know, fierce love is but honest, like straightforward honest, to call the demonic fires, let me go that far, the demonic fires, what they are, to name them as what they are, so that God's people can learn for themselves to distinguish. I like to think that our job as theologians is creating theologians. I want every human being to be a theologian in their own life so they can understand how to answer the question that you asked me, Ruby, and can see the difference between what God is doing and what man is doing and what the adversary is doing, because the adversary is at work as well. Thank you for that question.
So one of the gifts of the book as well, Dr. Lewis, is you have given to me and to others a new ancestor. And if I may call her name, Emma Lee Lewis.
Oh.
And I'm thankful for that gift. And what you share about your mother is like the other Emma Lees that I have known and who helped to raise me. They don't like a liar.
No.
And lie. You can do a lot of stuff, but you can't lie.
You cannot lie. No.
My question to you is, we live in a country now consumed with hiding the truth. Mm-hmm. History of human pain of the past and the present. Mm-hmm. How do we do this work of fierce love when there is such resistance, violent resistance to truth telling?
Oh, thank you, Reverend. Wow. I want to say two things there. One is, We think we've been taught that lies comfort us. We've been taught that people can't bear the truth. We've been taught that we're too much if we're honest. We've been taught that it's too risky to tell the truth. We've been taught polite behavior in church and out. We've been taught facade to protect ourselves. And I will tell you that in my mom's dying time, the most important gift that she gave her girl child was rebirth. I had already been born. She had raised a good girl. But even from her, Reverend, I sometimes hid myself, my pain, feeling like I had to earn my way in a room. And the things she said to me as she was dying, be you, do you, you can't possibly be too shiny. You can't possibly be too Jacqui. It was like being pushed out of her womb again. And I swear to God, I can't lie to save my life in here. And I wish I could bottle whatever that was that she was trying to do to teach this world, to teach our young people who have to create tomorrow for us, that the only thing that will make us free is truth. The only thing that will catalyze the revolution that we need is truth. Yes, truth spoken in love, but sometimes truth yelled at the top of our lungs, and sometimes truth spoken with our fists in the air. We have to cultivate the different languages of truth, but they all have to be true, because the lies are why we live in a broken land. The lies are why we live with constructs of white supremacy that stole the land from the Lenape people, from the indigenous people. I'm on Lenape land, but like we lied our way to owning this property. We lied our way into building America on the backs of Black people. We lie our way into boxing women into choices that are not theirs. So I think we need a true revolution that takes us to reconciliation. And there's no reconciliation without truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacqui, in Fierce Love, you talk a lot about love, and you talk a lot about Black folk theology.
Yes.
Could you tell me the connection between love and Black folk theology? Were there any modalities that Black people developed to offset empire theologies that were predicated on over and against each other and systemic injustices rather than love, agape?
Absolutely, Ruby. I want to just kind of honor you by saying your story of being raised by what you call theological geniuses, right? You were raised by theological geniuses in your community who helped you make meaning of your life and theirs, who contextualized for you the power you had to not hate anybody. I'm gonna love everybody in my heart. You can't make me hate you. You can't make me introject, is the language I would use as a psychologist, the hatred and the violence that is you, and take it into my life. So that's a real story in your world. A real story in my world is my mommy's mommy, Luella, candy striper, cotton picker, sharecropper, raising 3 children by herself, whose favorite scripture was, pray for your enemies, and who taught her kids that that's what love meant. Like, not pray for them that God will kill them, but pray for their transformation, right? Pray for their salvation, pray for their redemption. That's a real story. Mommy who sang in the choir with Fannie Lou Hamer, who knew her to get beat down and get back up again and keep working for justice. So there is something about the way Black people understand God and understand their relationship to the holy. And if Peter Paris was here, I wonder if he'd say, we brought that with us from Africa. like our African spirituality that included, friends, not only a sense of the divine, but a sense of the ancestors being with you all the time. So that when you get to the place where you're saying, in the Zulu custom of Ubuntu, Sawubona, it's not I see you, it's we see you. Me, my angels watching over me, my Lord, my ancestors, my God, my rock in a weary land. Like all of us are in this together. And that's what faith is. That's what love is. That's what fierce love is. Black folks' religion's tenacity, belief in the unbelievable, understanding our partnership with the holy, understanding the beauty of what it means to be Black in relationship to God. It makes me think about Baby Suggs' Holy in the Clearing, Ruby. That's Black folks' religion in the imagination, right? But here we all are in the bush harbors, or here we are all in the clearing. Men, you dance. Women, you sing. Children, you play. Now let's shake it all up. All the ways that we are human together is Black folks' faith in God, but also Black folks' faith in Black folks, that I think is the fiercest love of all. What do you think about that, Mama?
I think that's absolutely on target. And also, as I think about Black folk theology and our whole concept of agape and love, radical love, fierce love, was our ability to see the good in others that they failed to see in themselves, and to call them to that goodness, even when they resisted it. That's what I think radical love is, to be able to have a certain vision that goes to what you're, and to be able to really navigate what seems like unacceptable tensions. For example, as you said in the book, being at a Black Lives Matter meeting full of purpose, yeah, and then to come home on your television and see a world of violence, direct state-sanctioned violence and murder. How does, if one did not have that special insight that Black people had in terms of being able to see even beyond what appeared to be hopelessness, they were able to see goodness and to make some meaning out of that goodness. Had they not done that, and that's what I mean about spiritual geniuses, right. They were seers.
Yep, I love it.
They were absolutely master seers. And had they not been able to do that, Jacqui, they would have become, as ancient youth said, broken winged birds.
Right. That's right.
And instead they rose up like eagles.
Yep.
And they created a counterculture.
The people who could fly beyond today's reality. And what I love about what I think is fierce about Black folks' religion, and I just remember reading as a younger person these kinds of critiques, like Black spirituality was about otherworldliness, like, right? Like this right here, but then over there in that great getting up morning. But I don't think that's true at all. I think that Black folks' religion says we make this the world we dream of. Like, this is what it is, that this is the context in which we make heaven on earth, make the reign of God on earth, tikkun olam, as our Jewish friends would say. That just was like the day I got clear about that, I don't know what it was, but I felt like Helen Keller, like, oh, I've learned how to read a new way, that it is not about that. It is about this right here and our ability to see it healed and whole and well, and then make it that way.
Dr. Lewis, I think this is somewhat beyond the scope of what you do in this book, but I think you are pointing toward it. Churches and mosques, synagogues, temples talk a lot about love, but will not take the next step to tell us how to embody that in systems that provide for human flourishing and shared abundance. So, for example, we have to talk about what does it mean to call this nation a democracy, which I don't, because I don't believe it was or is, when the United States Senate being split 50-50, the Democrats represent 42 million more citizens. So if we had true democracy just in that chamber, you would have a Green New Deal, you would have living wages.
Yeah.
we've got to talk about an economic system that makes for fierce love is not American style capitalism.
Right.
Political system is not the one that we have. How do we begin to have those difficult discussions so that we can be the MLEs that give birth to true democracy, a land that has never been committed to multicultural, multiracial democracy?
Thank you so much for that question. And that tees up the next book, right? But in chapter 8, I'm talking about everyday justice, that everybody is responsible. I know that I have an ongoing conversation with some friends about white rage and Black grief, right? And I want to race what you're saying, because I think it is raced, right? I mean, it is raced that this nation is not created for your flourishing or mine. It's not created for Ruby's flourishing or mine. It's not. And so can the fierce love in a pulpit, let's do that, Reverend, can we as preachers or as people who hold who get to stand and give theological reflection, can we inspire/empower our people to see more clearly that their faith isn't just about a personal relationship with the holy, but their faith has to be horizontal. It has to be about connecting the dots between spirituality and justice. It has to be. We can't pretend like Jesus of Nazareth was not a political preacher, because in fact he was. And so let's stop that. And I think that's a place where sadly, even the Black church has interjected whiteness around what it means to be holy. We just gonna sit here and get our Jesus on, be happy, oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day. But we're not going to go to the polls. We're not going to say in the public square, this ain't okay. We're not going to go to the school board. We're not going to go to the PTA meeting. We're not going to go to the ward chapel. This life of faith in God has to be about creating the place where the scriptures say the crooked places are made straight and the high places are made low and the valleys are made high, and all flesh, love this text, go preach that every day, all flesh will see salvation together, all flesh. And what does salvation mean? This ain't about like, did I say the 12 things and got right with Jesus? Saved means you got food on the table. Saved means you have medical care. Saved means you have make a living wage. Saved means you're safe. You're not going to be shot down in your school. Don't let me get started. But like that's saved. That's saved. And Jesus was carnal, right? Saved meant I will feed you. I will clothe you. I mean, the call to take care of God's people is so present in the scripture, and we all walking around acting like as long as I got King Jesus, everything's going to be okay. No, it's okay when the people of God have touched holy because they've had their carnal needs met. And that, I think, is fierce love.
Thank you.
Jacqui, as you were talking, you said that this country was not created for democracy. I want to ask you a question. Who created this country? Who created creation?
Yeah, well, God created creation.
And so therefore,
what God's will is a democratic nation. But the humankinds who are often between God's will and God, I say screw that up big time. And I think it's ironic to think, here are the white folks in Great Britain feeling oppressed by the king, right? Oh my God, I'm not safe, I'm not good, I'm being oppressed upon by monarchy. Let's get on a boat and go over there and try to make another land. And they brought that with them. And then they kind of took on, I'm gonna say, indigenous senses of what democracy could be, but they still didn't live into that promise. And I'm not blaming white people when I say that, because there's enough of us to make it better. But I don't think, Ruby, that we've had yet enough holy imagination to really create the nation the way that we can. So let's think about what God wants for the world. God's dream is what you and I talk about, and let's live into that.
if God created the world, if God is the originator of creation, and we are God's children, who does creation belong to?
And creation belongs to all of us.
All right.
I think
And
it
so
does.
what fierce love tells us is that we are compelled, that we should have the faith, the courage,
Yeah.
not to see creation, not to believe that white people have the power and the ownership of creation. The fact is that we have agency.
That's
and
right.
it is our world. Rosemary Harding used to say that this is our world,
That's
and we're
right.
not going to let anyone have it.
I love it. I think
We've
that's
got
right.
to stop giving white men divine power. They do
Woo.
not own creation. It is ours to own and to shape.
Ours to own and to shape and to create out of it, into it, what we think does cause for human flourishing. So this, like, Ruby, you know, when you say that, and I'm grateful, I feel like I want to sit down with a whole bunch of young Black people who are beginning to give up on the process, right? I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to go to, you cannot, you know, the 5%ers that I used to work with in Trenton, it cracked me up, right? They didn't have a shared theology, but they had the sense that they were Psalm 85, a little less than God. And we Christians walk around like, oh, we can't say that. We're a little less than angels. That's not what it says. It says we're a little less than God. If we could imagine ourselves more in partnership with more agency, that God had ordained us, Ruby, right? Appointed us, anointed us, not just Jesus, but all of us, that the Spirit of God is upon us to preach good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, sight to the blind, to make a day of jubilee, to make America look like the reign of God. Come on, y'all. We can do that. Come on, y'all. That's our job. That's it. That's it. Or go home. You know?
I like to read another passage here. Can you feel what I mean by joy?
Ooh.
Feeling of freedom, of bounce back, of contentment, of wonder. Joy is a reservoir of goodness that makes you rock back and forth and hug yourself. Makes you smile for no reason, or your smile might prompt it. Joy makes you tilt your head back in a full-throated laugh. This description of joy is fantastic. And I think
Did I write that, Reverend?
You wrote that.
That's a beautiful passage.
And joy is political, and joy also is, it's dangerous.
Yes.
A lot of the violence that has been visited upon us is because we remain joyful. I think that Tulip, I could name others, but I'd like for you to share more about joy and how those of us who envision a new world, unlike how we are described, we don't do it out of anger. We don't do it from revenge. There is a deep reservoir of joy that moves us toward helping to create this new world. Just share more about joy. That really spoke to me.
Thank you so much. You know, I found that quote from Rumi that says, when you do something from your soul, it's a river, it's a joy. And I found myself thinking, Reverend and Ruby, that I was like, is Rumi Black? I wasn't sure, you know. I was like, it sounded so much like something that I knew in my body, that he just then made, like, yeah, that's right. That the soul of Black folks, my soul is joy at its root. I can only speak about this experience because I'm the one that's in this body, but I think it's true. I think it's true for others. Like when I watch Irish people dance that crazy fast foot dance, you know, when I see it's Pride Month and I see all my Queen folk having a good time down the street, joy is like our birthright, is what I would say. And I don't want to be academic when I describe it. I want to say, watch a baby discover their toes, you know? Watch a baby touched in the belly, almost before you get to the belly. My God, my grandson is howling before you get to his belly. There is the joy that is just from humanness, the taste of the carrot in your mouth, the taste of the grape in your mouth. The baby is hungry and the nipple comes, that's joy. It's who we are at our core, and it is power. And I think it's frightening. I think it's frightening. I think the power that is joy scares scares the powers and principalities, right? Rocks them to their core. What the hell? You guys are still singing? What? You're still dancing? Oh, hell no. You know, you're celebrating Juneteenth with red velvet cake and Kool-Aid? Oh, hell no. You know, there's a kind of resistance. So I would want the people who listen to this or who read the book to say, you know, I ain't got the magic on joy. All you got it. You got it. So let's cultivate it as an act of resistance to the powers and principalities, and let's be intentional about laughter, and let's be intentional. My siblings and I last weekend with my dad, lots of things going on. One of my brothers is having a really hard time. Daddy's not doing that well. We turned on James Brown, Get Up Off of That Thing. And we were back in the kitchen and we were children again, Ruby. We just danced and we just imitated Dad's dance that he does. And we just laughed and we just giggled. And then the grandchildren were giggling and laughing. And so I would say joy has to source our movements. Joy, joy, joy has to source our survival.
Thank you.
Can I talk to them like 3 more hours? Can we just do this 3 more hours? It's okay.
I think about Ralph Ellison's question that he asked. He asked whether or not Black people, whether or not we were simply, what our lives were simply what white people had made of them, or were our lives what we had also made of them.
Yes.
And I think about the genius, the spiritual genius of our ancestors was that they were able to make a joyful noise in the middle of the horrible sounds of segregation and state sanction and vigilante violence and murder. And it was that joyfulness that embodied in them a soul force.
That's right.
That was more powerful than all of the empire's weapons during the Southern Freedom Movement. The soul force was so powerful. Let me just tell a quick little story. I was reading Hands on the Freedom Plow the other day, and I came across a story about a woman named Joanne Christian, Joanne Mansow. When she was 15 years old in an Albany jail, they put her in solitary confinement during the movement, and they put a German Shepherd dog in the cell with her to eat her alive and to tear her apart, this 15-year-old Black girl. And she turned her face to the wall. She said, I turned my face to the wall and I prayed. That to me was a Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego moment.
Amen.
How do you talk, have you, in your journey towards serious love, can you talk about those kind of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego moments that you have observed, not only in Black folk, but in all folk? That is the hope of how we can move forward.
Yes, thank you, Ruby. Absolutely. I think your Jonathan story is a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story. For him to love you so much and to love God so much, to love freedom enough that he jumped in front of the bullets that were designed to kill you. I think when King goes to Memphis, and he must know that his life is on the line, because how could he preach that sermon? I'm happy tonight. I'm not fearing anything. I'm not worried about any man, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I have seen women march in the face of what feels like police violence, and to keep it moving, like the threat of that. I have laid on the ground in the Senate cafeteria building with Black, white, Asian, Indigenous, Muslim, Jewish, Christian people, our bodies all intertwined on the ground. And because I'm Black and have seen my neighbors, I mean, literally not the neighbors that are your neighbors, but your neighbor get his behind whipped by cops. the shiny black boots of the police next to us on the ground, and you're saying to yourself, we're supposed to lay here for 3 warnings, but what if that isn't the rules today? And to lay there anyway, terrified that you might get stomped on. I've seen that. I've been there for that. So there is something in the human spirit that's indomitable. Those women, Ruby, who stood in front of tanks in Palestine, Israel, right? To say we're going to stop this fighting. Those women in, I want to say South Africa, but I might be Namibia, who decided they weren't going to have sex with their men until they stopped fighting. I mean, we have been arrested. We have been snapped on by dogs, shot with water hoses. We have been clubbed. Indigenous people have stayed out in the cold overnight, over many nights, to stop the building of pipelines. Human beings know how to resist with our bodies and with our soul, because we know what we're standing up for is about more than our bodies. It's about the wholesale salvation of all of God's people, the wellness of God's people. And we've used our lives in service of that for millennia.
There's another interesting passage. When I graduated from seminary, I was called to start a new church in Trenton together with a group of others who were assigned to leave their home church for 3 years and start a new one. We made our congregation in an old abandoned building, and we called it the Imani Community Church. I think it's fair to assume from how you've lived your life that you believe there is profound value in community.
Yes.
Possible in community that defies borders and tears down boundaries. Why do you still believe that community can make a difference? Because we got these religious communities, the nation is literally pockmarked by them, and it doesn't seem like we get much done sometimes.
I'm so grateful for that question, to be able to be but honest, authentic, honest about the ways I think that communities have failure as well. Like, you know, communities can drink the Kool-Aid of fear, to think money is more important than, you know, ministry. I think saving face is more important than saving souls. Feeding the offering plates more important than feeding the poor people. This is our space. Don't let those children in here and mess up our pews. We have that. We know how to do that. But when I was a little girl in a Presbyterian church in Chicago, that was at that moment a mixed church. It was the Irish Mrs. McGuire and Black Reva Dixon teaching me music and the songs that would strum my pain and also sing my salvation. It was E. Valeria Murphy, a teeny tiny Black lady who took me all around the state of Illinois, teaching me that the Chicano people's struggle was mine, that the white Appalachian people's struggle is mine, that the Black people's struggle is mine. Like, I'm so blessed that I was baptized into a faith by women and men who helped me to see the humankind all was my problem. And so this is the kind of community I serve now. I wish I could bottle up Middle Church and put it everywhere. Oh, you can come to Middle Church online. Yes, you can, at 11:45 on Sundays. It is the same kind of community where the Chinese people go past the churches in Queens to come be in relationship with the Latinx queer woman who comes and to be in relationship with the white banker who, I mean, there is also, at the same time that we're pockmarked with BS, Reverend, bad stuff, there are good pockets of resistance everywhere, popped up relationships between Sikhs and Muslims and Jews and Christians that are doing good things. My friends in the Auburn Seminary that include rabbis and Sikh activists and artists and writers. I have so much hope, because good people everywhere also rise up together and hold hands across difference and move the world toward justice. I am a witness that that happens.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one last question.
Sure.
You say that the starting point for radical love is self-love.
Mm.
And I'd like to, could you tell us the difference between self-love and narcissism
Ooh,
or individualism? And
yes.
also, how is it that people love themselves when the theological language reflects a systemic hierarchy of calling people marginalized? What
Mm.
is the good news, and how does one love oneself when when there's theological, when their spiritual guides tell them that they're marginalized, which
Oof.
means that they're less than worthy?
Yep.
How is it that we need to change our language so that we speak in tongues, so that we can say to people, look, you're marginalized within the system, but within the God's creation and with each other, you're essential.
Beautiful.
How
Beautiful.
do you begin to undo those kind of mixed messages and those schisms where we not where our faith language is not simply a replication of the empire's language, that we began to speak in multiple tongues about the human condition?
Thank you so much, Ruby. You know, just to quickly exegete this text that's always in my mind. First of all, almost all the world's religions talk about love your neighbor as yourself, right? The Hebrew scriptures, it's really much more love the stranger because you were strangers in the strange land. One time says love your neighbor as yourself, but Jesus picks that up. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God with everything you have. Love your neighbor as yourself. Quoting Deuteronomy and Leviticus. The Quran says, don't withhold that from anyone that you need for yourself. The Sikh tradition says, don't do anything to break anyone's heart. Can you imagine a world in which we just live, we ain't gonna break nobody's heart? That'd be amazing. But what we miss in the upbringings that we grew up in is love neighbor, love self has an equal sign. You cannot love yourself if you don't love your neighbor, and you cannot love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. What's the curriculum, Reverend and Ruby, to teach people how to love themselves? What is the core of that? Well, Psalm 139, you are awesomely and wonderfully made, right? Awesomely and wonderfully made. Before your substance is formed, God sees you, knows what you're gonna say, knows the mistakes you're gonna make, knows your junk, and you are loved, loved, loved. David writes that psalm after having sex with Bathsheba and having Uriah killed, and he still knew God loved him. So this kind of ubiquitous feeling of love for yourself is a calling from God, y'all. It's not a by the way, it's a calling from God. Love neighbor as self. We need to spend time teaching people what that is, and it isn't narcissism. Narcissism is a wound. Narcissist looked in the river and saw himself and thought, that's me, fell in and died. Narcissism comes from a hole in the self, a lack of self-esteem, a lack of being well held by a culture or community. Narcissism, you know, somebody has that hole in their soul when they can't make space for other people and they got to be the center of attention. They can't shut up. They can't be. That's not self-love at all. That is a wound that needs to be tended to. And I would submit that this nation was built by a lot of narcissistically wounded people, but let's talk about that another time. So if we can just lose in our congregational life, in our theological conversation, the sense that loving yourself is somehow a sin, or loving yourself is somehow braggadocious. No, it's a command from God. And I write in the book about how to cultivate that by looking at yourself with an unconditional regard for you, by appreciating yourself. It's almost sacrilegious to not look at your body, your psyche, your dreams and hopes, your failings and your foibles, all of that designed by God for the universe as a gift to the universe. Don't blaspheme God by not loving you. And then the language thing, Ruby, is so important. We keep saying things to each other over and over again that reinforce patriarchy, that reinforce supremacy, that reinforce that you're not shiny. I want every little child in America to stand in the mirror and brush their teeth while they're brushing their teeth, like, I am shiny. Why? Because God made me. I am beautiful. Why? While you're flossing your teeth? Because God made me. Because God didn't make no junk. And so let's stop using language that reinforces low self-esteem, that reinforces the story that the empire is saying about you. I don't say it anymore, Mama. You taught me that. There are no marginalized people. There are people who seek to marginalize you, but you are a child of God. Thank you, Ruby Sales. Period, paragraph. Amen.
Amen.
And I think into that language is so important, because also I don't use the word marginalized, nor do I use the word minority, because we are not minorities. We have been minoritized.
That's right.
I think there's a lot that you do in this book with language. A very simple, but I think an elegant thing you do is you match the words fierce and love.
Mm.
Talk to us about that. I mean, you go through it in the book, but when did that word pairing first come to you?
Almost like an oxymoron, right, Rev?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, I do think I have to thank, the gospel according to Emily Lewis for that my mother's love, short story about Emma, who walked with Jesus and butter would not melt in her mouth until she was angry, and then she would cuss you out real good. But on the one hand, she taught all of her kids to kind of turn the other cheek and love the world, that actually your ability to navigate conflict was an act of holiness, an act of godliness. You know what I mean? Like how to deal with that. I got that deep. But one girl named Jennifer, when we were growing up, was just stank mean to me every time she could be. She told me I talked proper. She told me I thought I was white. I'm like, look at this. Really? That's not possible. Okay, we were not passing, but she was just mean. And one day she came to my front porch and wanted to take my pop bottle money, because that's how you got money when you were little kids. Knee-high pop bottles. Are y'all with me? I'm dating myself. And she wanted to take my pop bottle money. And I ran into my backyard and ran into the back door. And Emily Lewis was like, what's the matter, baby? I was like, Jennifer started to take my pop bottle money. And she said, get out of my house. What? Get out of my house. Go and handle your business. If you don't handle your business with her, she's going to keep chasing you in this backyard, and I'm not having it. And she closed the screen door and closed the door and locked it. Woo, that was some fierce love, Ruby and Reverend. I was like, what are you trying to do here, Mama? But I went up front and I said to Jennifer, I'm going to get a spanking if you take my money, and I'm not trying to get a spanking. So what are we going to do? And I navigated the waters with that girl about like splitting that pop money. Okay, so we could stop this fight. That is fierce love. Love that will snatch, we see it in the animal kingdom, swat, a deer will fight for the life of their fawn with a lion and die, but you are not taking my baby. When we see a stranger about to step into traffic because they're reading their phone, we don't let them walk. We grab their elbow and we pull them back in for a stranger. When I had a car accident at 22 and had nobody to take care of me, a stranger, a good Canadian, took me to the hotel, paid the bill, bought me food, right? Took me back to the rental car place. Fierce love, just all kinds of risks, breaking the rules to love me. That's what I have discovered is fierce about love. And when we put it together, I think we have revolutionary material.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Aviva, are you here to take us forward? All right.
Something about Q&A is going wrong, I heard. Is that right?
Oh, okay.
Now I saw, hi, Melissa.
Hey, Dr. Afal.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for such an incredible, I'm feeling all kinds of way. I'm having all kinds of very intense emotions with hearing you, this authenticity, all these different, such important questions and concepts. And wow, it's been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm getting other messages telling me this too on the private lines. Thank you so much. I will go now to Q&A because we have another 15 minutes or so
Okay.
that we can use to ask more question. So there's a few that are not in the Q&A, but that I will ask anyways.
Okay.
First, I have one that is for me, but it is also sort of for all educators at Georgetown and beyond, who are a lot of the people who follow us in are usually in classrooms, maybe they be students or teachers, and it's sort of extending from what you were speaking earlier about the theological practice in you as teachers. Do you have any sort of and this question, by the way, is for the three of you, because I want to take advantage of having such incredible people with us to also give us their take on this in terms of infusing. What advice basically do you have for educators to infuse this fierce love and radical justice within their teaching practice, whether or not it's related? Because as I said earlier, we work in between all of these different fields at Georgetown, from the law school to the medical fields to psychology, business school. Everybody's doing so many different things, but I think in the classroom, is, as Bell Hooks would say, the classroom is the most radical space. And how do we take that fierce love? If you could, all of you, sort of address that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Do my colleagues want to go first? Because I've been talking a lot.
No, you go first, Jacqui.
You go first. I think it does start with the professor. I think it starts with the professor really doing the work of loving self. I tell a story in the book about having a teacher who I could tell was hazed when they were in school, because they were hazing us. So that if we don't really have an authentic sense of love and appreciation, unconditional regard for your own unique particularity, non-possessive delight for your particularity, I think every piece of work we do can be fraught. But if the professors are saying, I am absolutely wonderfully made, I am okay today, I am feeling in my body love, the way you interact with your students will be from that place. It will feel less power over. It will feel more democratized. It will feel invitational, right? It will feel secure. It will be not threatened by weird questions. You know, I think it does start here. So that practice of, I'm going to really work on me, then the way you rate your curriculum, the way you be in the classroom, the way you engage with students, the way you engage with your peers, all of that is different if it comes from your own sense of self-love and power. That's what I would say.
I would say that, to me, a classroom is a highway that leads us back to our authentic selves. And so the question is, what are the routes that we take back to who we are before we've been fractured and socialized away from our authenticity? And so I think that it's really important to really design curriculum that are democratized. And so we have to navigate the very challenging terrain of teaching multiple stories at one time. There is no monolithic truth. There is no monolithic story. And so to me, the whole process has to be democratized. And how is it that you do, and to move, and to really interrogate our assumptions about what is a good education. I mean, I was at Princeton and everybody told me I was getting such a good education, but in truth, it took me 15 years to undo the education that I got at Princeton that taught me to call enslavers masters, which really legitimized their superiority, or call sites of terror plantations. And so when you do that, what you're doing is that you're requiring students to commit soul murder. And so the question is, how is it that education is used as a process of recovery?
Love that. A road back to your authentic self. Oof, love that.
I think I'm going last because we're going somewhat kind of in order of intellectual gifting. So you all bear with me. What I would say is that I remember sitting in a course with a profound professor who said that the challenge with education is you are giving people information that shakes their very ground of being. The very things that they hold on to for meaning in the world crumble with true education. So you've got people going to the most prestigious universities, colleges, seminaries, graduate schools in the nation who have been taught not history, but hagiography. When they see this nation appearing to come apart at the seams, they have no idea that this is by design. They have no idea that democracy and universal suffrage was not a part of the plan. They have no idea about the racialized violence. They have no idea about conquest, settler colonialism. So what I would say is that those who teach truth have an obligation to tend to the souls of their students, because it is painful. All of us organize our lives around myth and story. What Christianity is one myth story, right? What traditional religions, they have other stories. The national story that organizes our lives is shot through with lies and with deceit. And part of what we're experiencing theologically and politically is the fact that that house of lies is crumbling and something new has to emerge. So people like you, Dr. Afab, who you're trying to teach people into the reality of what is, we have to provide, I think, huge nets of care, because people are being exposed to something that is shaking them. On campuses like Georgetown and other campuses where I've been, you got some very conservative students who resist, and faculty who resist this very conversation. Last thing I'll say is this: my reading of Houston Baker and his interpretation of conservatism, he talks about how when the monarchical houses of Europe were falling and a divinely appointed monarchy was disappearing from people's political imagination, conservatism arose to say, but here are the people who are naturally fit to govern, fit to rule. And so when we see conservatives who want to hold on to power, if you do the intellectual genealogy, they come from an idea that says, no, we are the ones who must rule. Others are not fit, are not worthy. We're working through that, because the same idea, these others are not fit to think, they're not fit to lead, they're not fit to imagine. So teaching is dangerous, and you've got to hold space because it's a difficult work.
Beautiful. Thank you.
How is it that we hold space? I'm always fascinated with that way of phrasing it, because does that mean that we own the space to hold? What does it mean to hold space?
I need to spend more time with you, Dr. Sills. What I think it means is, it is, my interpretation is a shared space.
Right.
Where there is abundance and freedom of movement and thought without judgment and without violence. So when I say a whole space, I mean, you can share, as in what I think Reverend Jacqui is doing in this book, whatever you need to share, and we will hold you and hold what you say and not judge or dehumanize. I might need to find better language, but that's what I mean.
Well, as one thing about being an older Black woman is that you can ask your children another question. So I'm going to ask you another question. How does one hold that which belongs to all of us?
How does one hold that which belongs to all of us? Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say? I would say that there is a such thing as a communal holding. It's something we don't do well in the United States, but I think there are communities that do know how to hold. And I don't see it as ownership based. I see it as a sharing in humanity, a sharing in spirit. But that would be my thinking. What would you say, Dr. Lewis?
I think this is a great question. I think, what you all are talking about in my mind is a container, right? A holding environment is a container. And so I would say it is, maybe my imagination is, you're creating that democratized space, Ruby, you're calling it together. Maybe the professor, who sadly, whatever it all is in the world, would have more power in the room, would actually let go of some power in the room and would help empower the students to help create that container together with the professor. And I think maybe that's what you mean, Rev, is the kind of idea that we all together create the kind of environment that we want. So let's say it's day one in the classroom, you're creating norms together. So the teacher creates the curriculum, but you all are creating norms together. And what are the norms together? So it's, we're gonna let people finish their sentences. I'm making up stuff now, right? But we're not gonna interrupt. If we are ready to disagree, we might make a rule about how. Like we might say, you reflect first and then interrupt. I don't know. We did that in some of our PhD classes because they were in psych, but together you create the norms of the container and then everybody's responsible for them, to them, is kind of what's going on in my imagination. Is that what you mean?
I was thinking about what I would say is that the mutuality of claiming.
Mutuality of claiming, Ruby? Claiming?
Yeah, of claiming.
Yeah.
Because when you say, I don't know, but it seems to me that there's a very fine line between holding and the language of inclusion. And to be inclusion assumes that someone owns the table and that they have the power to include you in that which belongs to them. I prefer to say democratization, or I prefer to say claiming that which belongs to all of us.
Okay. Yeah.
How does that you facilitate my ability, help me claim that which belongs to me?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good, I think that's a good edit. But I think the intention, that's what I would want to be teaching back into the space for the professors is you want to do what Ruby is saying. You want to help the students claim their space. You want to help them claim the space that is theirs to create with you. And you want to do what Rev is saying is to say, then you also want to be responsible to remind them that that's what we're creating together. And I'm sorry, all of that is revolutionary because that's not, I never felt more infantilized than when I got back to get a PhD. That right. You are regressed to childhood sometimes, right? In those classrooms. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for such an incredible insight and just having us reflect on the way of our teaching practice. And I think what also Ruby was talking about, the question of power, right? Within the space, how does that power circulate? And are we here to have a professor and then students who are receiving, or are we all here trying to just learn together and having more of a facilitator than this sort of hierarchical sort of framework when we're trying to actually dismantle that and think in a subversive way, hopefully, and trying to lead students to revolution. At least that's one of my goals.
And is Paolo Freire too old to read Paolo Freire? And the kind of, I think that's a good book to go back to about that teaching.
We have a couple of minutes, so I try to combine questions that were also asked upon registration, and they're all around basically. So there is one audience members today that asked, I will just read it and then add onto this. How do you prevent yourself from getting tired of always being trying to be the great equalizer, give balance and symmetry to others when it is not reciprocated, or even what is considered as part of the equation of human interaction? What keeps you going and moving forward in faith and fierce love when our world and the enemy seems to keep rerouting towards negativity, cynicism, lack of faith, hope, love? And also I will add a couple of more questions that are basically very, very connected, which is, what encouragement has been the most helpful to you in times of burnout and uncertainty? And how do you respond with love and kindness with community members make thoughtless, racist, disparaging comments that caused even more distress and harm, knowing that we're in a very difficult context? So sort of, trying to touch, I know it's a lot, but just basically in your own practice, perhaps to clearly the times that we in are asking for these.
I just want to jump in and say, you are not going to not be tired. That's just real. It is a tiring life. It just is. Just a tiring life. To try to live this ethic of love, this ethic of fierce love, this ethic of radical love is tiring. And so that's just what it is. Like you're working out and it's tiring. That's why you work out. You're ripping muscles, and then they're going to get stronger where you ripped them. Ooh, that feels better. You feel the soreness of your abs. Why? Because you did those planks. So this is tiring. Hello, it's not for the weak. It is not for the wimpy. It is not for the fearful. It is for all of us, though, to step into, and it is exhausting, right? Because our back of brain nature is to cuss somebody the F out when they hurt our feelings. And that's not really all that helpful. So I think it's tiring. And I just want to say, yes, it is. And what do? You pace yourself. So today is Friday, and I don't take nearly enough time off. But when I get through with this today, I've got to write 3 emails, and then I'm going to watch a movie with John. I'm giving myself some time out. You just have to pace yourself. You jump in the river, it's your turn. You do the work, you tag out. I'm tagging out today. And you take a Sabbath. You're not God. You're a little less than God. And since you're a little less than God, you have to take a break. I think that, and I do mean to blow a little, I do want to just blow a big kiss to my mama. I often think about Ruby's generation, and that would be my dad as well. But I think about the generation of Black people who deserve to kick everybody's butt if they want to. They just should be allowed to just kick everybody's butt because the world has been mean, but they don't. So I'm like, if they don't, let me try not to. If they can find a way to be resilient and have hope, if they can find a way to articulate, like Ruby is always articulating, I'm not giving up on white people. I'm not giving up on these people. I'm not giving up on anybody because everybody has the capacity to love. That is, to me, then my calling at my age. And Ruby told me one day, I'm an elder too. And I was like, I'm really not, but yes, I really am. I'm older than I look, and I'm an elder too. So I'm going to model for the people that are younger than me how we can have difficult conversations, how we can tell the truth in love, how we don't have to be wimpy, punky about it, but you don't have to kill people. You can say, I'm not comfortable with that, and stand in for truth. And I think that's, every day we do it, we can do it better the next day. That's my answer. What do you think?
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
You're nodding. Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Afaf, did you want to hear from all of us? I know we're at
I
time.
think so. Maybe we can just do a closing word and sort of answering to that and concluding would be great. We have a couple of more.
The only thing that I would add to what Dr. Lewis is saying is that I have learned to do beautiful things with beautiful people as a means of replenishment. Concerts, listening to music that I love, reading the stuff that I love. One thing that's very wonderful about our technological age is I can go to YouTube and watch Malcolm X all day.
Yeah.
I can watch Thelonious Monk play live. I can watch Nina Simone live. So I replenish myself ancestrally. I replenish myself with the beautiful, and my ass is oftentimes. So it's all those things together. Dr. Lewis share. It's an interesting weaving of all of it.
I think that it's really important in life to know how to disassemble and reassemble. And what I mean by that is to take what I need to take with me, but throw away what I don't need. Give back to the world that which belongs to the world, and take that which belongs to me. And so I don't take on burdens that belong. I don't take on racism as if it's something that belongs to me. I don't take on heterosexism as if it's something that belongs to me. That's not mine to carry. So I give it back to the people who need to do the work to get rid of it. And so I think that oftentimes we get tired because we weight ourselves down with other people's burdens and weights. And so I think, and part of the other way that I think I've not gotten tired is that when I think about how beloved my generation was by our elders, that we were so beloved that they were willing to open doors for us, put their lives on the line to open doors that they themselves never were able to walk into. They were able to imagine a world for us that they themselves could never enter into that world and work hard to bring it into being. I do not think of myself as little. I think one gets tired when one sees one's life through trauma and leave out the love, leave out the radical love. So I think it is Jacqui's fierce love that she talked about, that she writes so beautifully about, that keeps me from being tired.
That's beautiful, Ruby. And I just would say in closing, I cannot believe I got to have this conversation today with these two brilliant people. I'm so grateful for being hosted by you. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, Michael Vasquez, who set this up for us. And Ruby and William, if it's okay to just call you by your first name, to say, oh my God, I feel so just enriched by this conversation. And to say to everybody, I am a work in progress and so are you. We are all trying to get it together and we can do it together. We have everything we need, I think, to heal the world. We just don't know it. So let us read the things that give us joy. Let us play with our little people. Let us laugh and dance. Let us sing and cry. Let us read our way to freedom. Let us march our way to freedom. Let us worship our way to freedom. Let us learn our way to freedom, because this is the project of humanity, is to heal the world in partnership with the holy. Why, however you name it, love, universe, peace, God. Let's do this together. Let's do it.
And let us all, I hope you'll govern by radical love.
That's right. Do it. Love it. Love
Please
it.
govern by fierce love.
Fierce love. Buy it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much for such an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful we were able to have this space. I think everybody was extremely touched and impacted by the three of you sharing such incredible insights and reflections and your work and you constantly sort of, as you said, we are all a work in progress and trying to strive to make this place a better world.
Yes.
Thank you to our partners, the DC Public Library, the Women's Center, the campus ministry, the Protestant ministry at Georgetown, for partnering with us to bring this conversation to you today. It is actually recorded, so we will be posting it because a lot of people have asked, so they have classes and everything, so it will be posted and we'll send it to everybody who registered, and I'll send it to you.
Where will it be posted? Where will it be posted?
Next week.
Okay,
week.
on this website. Okay.
Perfect, exactly. So I'll send the link to everyone. Thank you again for your time and for sharing your whole soul with us today. You all have a blessed Friday and weekend. And I hope to see you at Georgetown in person in the future. We hope to have you there. Thank you again. Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Reverend, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ruby. Love you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Aviva and Tony. This was wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.